Welcome back, guys. We're going to talk about the politics of boom and bust today in this first lesson and the second lesson as well, when we do that one in a few days. But we're going to start out with looking at the 1924 election. Now, you remember the last chapter, lesson 2, we left off with Harding defeating Cox in the election of 1920, and I showed you a map like the one you're looking at here. And if you remember that map, it was blue on the bottom. That's the Democrats. 1924 doesn't change. Now here we have Calvin Coolidge that runs for office and wins. And he's winning against the Democrat in the South, and he wins all of the North. And so that's kind of where we're at. It's called the Roaring Twenties for a reason. There's lots of really great things that are happening in the United States during the 1920s. The economy is good. Culture is changing. We've got a car. We've got air conditioning, we've got a washing machine, we've got credit, we've got radio, we've got baseball, we've got everything. Everything is good. 1928, look at the next election, the next slide. And we have here, Hoover wins. And Hoover wins most of the country, but look what he doesn't win. He doesn't win the South. Again, the South stays very strong as Democrat. Remember, they hated Abraham Lincoln, and they hated what Abraham Lincoln did, took their rights away, they believed, by ending slavery. And so they're very much against the Republican Party. Now, in 1964, that flip-flops and it changes, but we're a few chapters from that, so we'll talk about that later. And we'll spend probably one whole lesson just looking at that flip. But right now, 1928, Hoover wins in this election. Now, we're going to talk today about the stock market crash, and if you look at the next slide, the only thing we're going to do in this lesson is explain how that takes place. Okay, so we can see on this slide here, we have green and red. They kind of look like bubbles, but I want you to notice the word contraction. Now, a contraction, above the contraction where there's an arrow that kind of points down. Now, contraction is when something shrinks. Now, when the economy shrinks, it contracts. And then you can see another arrow that points away from the word trough. And that's when it kind of begins to bottom out. And then it begins to increase again. And that is called expansion. Now, as we come out of expansion, we come into good, where we're making money. Now, this is the stock market we're talking about and how we spend. And we reach peak, which means the high point, and then we begin to come down again. And we go through the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and there's no way to get away from that. And part of the reason for that is because people will spend a lot of money when they have a lot of money. But the factories that make the products that people buy, they don't know when to stop. They stop when the people stop buying. And so if you suddenly stop buying things, the factories have so much things left over, and so they can't sell them anymore, and so they have to send their workers home. And if they send their workers home, the workers now don't have income. They don't have money to spend. Now maybe those workers were spending money buying a new pair of shoes, but now they don't have the money to buy that new pair of shoes. Maybe they were going out for dinner twice a week, or 5 times a week, or 7 times a week. But now they don't have that money, and they cannot ever go out for dinner. And so the restaurant and the shoemaker now also don't have income. And so they stop spending money. And when that happens, the economy contracts. Then when people feel good about the economy again and they begin to buy things again, the economy begins to go back up. Maybe I go buy the pair of shoes. Maybe I go out to eat. So this is how the economy works. And so in 1929, at the end of this really great year of expansion, the stock market crashes. Now look at the next slide. The stock bubble means it's bigger than it really should be. It's getting ready to pop. Worth $27 billion in 1925. It's worth $87 billion in 1928. It triples in 4 years. That means if you put $1,000 in, you have $3,000 in 4 years. If you put $10,000 in, you have $30,000 in 4 years. That's not normal. The stock market should double every 7 years. So that means if you put $10,000 in the stock market, it should take 14 years for that to increase the same amount that it increased in 4 years. It's just not normal, or more, maybe not 14 years, maybe 10 years, because we're really double and a half, or times and a half times that rate. So 27 times 2 is 54, and then you add another 27 to that, and you get about 87. So it's massively increased the stock market, and people are buying on credit. They're spending money that they don't have. And tax cuts are coming in, and that means that people are spending more money. Instead of putting money into bank accounts, they're spending more and more money. So it's good for the economy when they spend, but it's this huge bubble. And people believed the economy was good. And people believe the economy is good, people are going to put more money into it. If you think the economy is bad, you're going to take your money out. And this is what's about to happen. Everyone thought the economy was good. And then there's things going on behind the scenes that they cannot see. I'm moving my hand and you can't see it. Just like the economy, things are happening and you can't see it. So this is what it is. If you look at the next slide, housing construction declines. That means people are buying less houses. People are committing to spend less money. Interest rates. How much do you have to pay to borrow money? It's going up. Wage increases. How much are your yearly raises? It's not steady, and so it slowly takes away people's income. Factories are producing too many things, and by mid-1929, housing, automotive, cars, tires, railroad, steel, all producing more than they can sell. And the European economy is struggling as well. Now look at the next slide. Finally, this all comes to a head. October 24, it's called Black Thursday, 1929. The market in one day loses 11%. The next day, big bankers buy a lot of stock, and so there's no loss. But when the market opened back up on Monday and Tuesday, they lost 25%. Continued to go down. And by 1932, if you had $10,000 into the stock market before Black Thursday, by 1932, you have $1,000. You lost 90% of all of your money that you had in the stock market. That's massive. That's huge. On the next slide, we see the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Now, this is Republicans in Congress were trying to put protective tariffs on imports. That is, if you can make something cheaper in China than we can make in the United States, the United States will put a tax on the product in China to make the prices similar. And this is something that Republicans were doing. Between 1929 and 34, because of these protective tariffs, trade shrunk. We stopped buying things from China or from Europe or from Canada or Mexico. And because we're not getting those cheaper prices, people have to buy the American product, which is much more expensive. And so trade shrinks and people stop buying the expensive product. And so people just stop spending money. The Federal Reserve and interest rates, this is something that really would require an entire lesson on its own. And we're not going to talk a lot about this now, but I would like you to do some research and Google or Bing or search on the internet for what is the American Federal Reserve and what are the interest rates. But in a nutshell, the Federal Reserve sets interest rates. It sets the amount of money that you have to pay to borrow money from the bank. So if you borrow $1,000 from the bank will say, okay, you're going to pay us $1,100. You're going to pay us a 10% interest over 1 year. And if it's 2 years, you're going to pay another 10%. 3 years, another 10%, until finally you paid way more than you actually borrowed. That's called an interest rate, and the Federal Reserve sets that rate. If they want you to stop spending, they raise the interest rate. If they want you to start spending and spend more, they lower that rate. So then you'll buy a house or buy a car, and those take a long time to pay off. People began to keep money in their jars at home, and banks began to accumulate more money, and they didn't loan as much out. So now, not just that there's less jobs and we don't have as much trade, but if you want to buy a car, the bank, because the economy is not good, the bank won't give you the money to buy that car. You don't have the cash to buy that car. You have to go to the bank and get a loan. And the bank says, no, because the economy is not good, we're afraid you will never pay us back. And so it made it even more difficult. So this is a ripple effect. Banks close because people take money out of savings, and the banks don't have any insurance. If the bank closes, you've lost your money. Today, banks have insurance. Companies go bankrupt because there's no more shareholder money. People stop investing and they lose 90%. So what is a company supposed to do? They have no money. So the company goes bankrupt, and everyone loses not just money, but their jobs. Unemployment rate goes up. That means how many people are looking for work but cannot find it. And the amount of money that you can make goes down. And people will stop giving out credit. So you can't just get a car, but you can't use credit to even buy groceries. And so you just can't spend as much money. And so it's just so difficult for the economy and for Americans. And so we go to this last slide, and I want you to remember again this bubble. There's 4 stages to an economic cycle. Contraction, where the economy shrinks. Trough, where it hits the very bottom. Peak, or expansion, where it's building back up. And peak, where it's at the top and it's getting ready to come back down. And the thing is, you never know where the economy is going to peak or where it's going to trough. You want to put all your money in at the trough, but you don't know where that's at. At the peak, you want to take it all out, but you don't know where that's at. So it's just a guessing game. But you can see that the average, if you're looking at this picture, you can see that the average is still up. So if you put your money in and you leave it in, you'll weather these troughs and expansions and peaks and contractions, and everything will be okay. All right, so we're going to continue talking about the stock market crash and the Great Depression in the next lesson. But you have to understand what that first stock market crash was all about and what caused that. And that's lesson 1. We'll see you back here, lesson 2, in a few days. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.